All right, so welcome everyone to SciEngage. My name is Jeff Hunt, and I am one of the organizers of our monthly SciEngage discussions, along with, I think I see Erica, and I don't know if Alana and Emily are on as well from AAAS, but we have Kristen from AAAS who's helping us out today as well. Happy Juneteenth to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh, there's Emily from a different position than we normally see her. Yeah, so I'm going to give some quick logistical notes. If everybody just keep themselves on mute while we're going through this. We'll have time for questions, both back and forth and using the chat box. And that's basically it. I'm going to turn things over to Rose. So take it away, Rose.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everyone too for joining today. We're excited to share some of our work with you and really to hear your questions and other thoughts that our presentation brings up for you. So please feel free to use the chat pretty actively. We'll do our best to monitor it and to incorporate your questions as we go through. As Jeff said, I'm joined with Keita Jones and Lexi Schultz, who are two of my colleagues on this project, and I'll introduce a little more fully in a minute. But we first just wanted to provide an overview of our work as to sort of set some foundation for the rest of the conversation that'll take place. So I will just quickly share a few slides. Okay, so you're all seeing my screen, right? Great. So we are a group of science societies, and we're working collaboratively to advance what we're calling a culture of civic science. We think about this as one where societal needs and diverse perspectives shape science itself, and then that scientific discoveries inform people and decisions and policies. So there's really kind of a emphasis here on the bi-directional relationship between science and the broader society and kind of mutual benefit and partnership throughout. We're thinking about our work in terms of a collective impact framework, so one where we can achieve a lot more together than we might achieve individually as scientific societies on their own. And I wanted to kind of touch first on what kinds of activities we're talking about and who we're talking about. So here are just a few glimpses of the kind of things we're talking about. You've got the large picture at the bottom, the Rally for Medical Research, is an example of Science Society's very active work in science advocacy, particularly at the federal level. So that's kind of one form that our work takes. We also have the STEM and Culture Chronicle there is from SOCNUS, and it's a outlet where researchers can share their work and their experiences with broader audiences. And then AAAS's Family Science Days is another fantastic example of kind of engaging the public with science and bringing more people into the science community and doing the process of science. And I'm going to hold off on sharing the other two, the International Year of Sound and Voices for Science, because I think Keita and Lexi will talk a bit more about those in a little while. But these are the kinds of activities that we're thinking about when we talk about societies supporting civic science. So as I mentioned, we are kind of adopting what we're calling a collective impact approach, and we're following this framework set out by a lot of a broad sector, sort of I should say actually a cross-sector collaboration framework, which is what collective impact typically entails. And although we're all kind of the same type of organization, we are still following many of their kind of guideposts, I guess, for creating social change. So our group kind of has rallied around this video, and so I'm just going to quickly show this few-minute video to all of you. If you could just give me a thumbs up in a second to tell me the audio is working, that would be helpful. so that's obviously a bit metaphorical. Now to bring us back to the actual project at hand, we have a number of goals, but the few that we want to focus on today are first, to learn from and with each other, particularly about how we can best support researchers who engage with diverse audiences. So again, this includes advocacy and public engagement, of course, outreach, science communication, and knowledge co-production or community science as well. And scientific societies have long supported these kinds of activities, particularly because ensuring that science benefits society is deeply embedded in their missions. So this is really kind of an effort to level up the work in that area and to kind of learn from parallel efforts that are often going on at different organizations. Alongside this, we're working to create more opportunities for collaboration, again, to just kind of increase our reach and to do more together than individual societies might have the capacity to do on their own. And then finally, to contribute to institutional change. So we recognize that there are already a lot of efforts to, particularly at universities, but also among funders and industry as well, to create a culture that's more supportive and encouraging of engagement, including rewarding researchers who engage and providing resources for that engagement. And so one of our goals is to really kind of use our collective weight and clout to contribute to efforts that are already underway in that area as well. We'll jump more a little bit into the projects that help us achieve those things in just a moment. I'll stop sharing my screen though, because that was sort of the prepared overview that we have for you all. And now I want to introduce my co-presenters. So Keita Jones is the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the Acoustical Society of America. And Lexi is the Vice President of Public Affairs at American Geophysical Union. But now that you have a quick kind of sense of who we are, we also would like to learn a little bit more about you. So I'm going to launch this one question poll for you all, which you should see on your screen. And I believe you can choose more than one option, but I'm not entirely sure. We're just kind of interested in what perspective you bring, or I guess, if you will, what hats you're wearing today, so we can think a little bit more about how our work connects with yours. Give you one more second. We've got a little over 50% participation already, so thank you for that. Okay, we're nearly all there. So I guess you can see that we have people from a number of different areas, which is exactly what we expected. Excited to see especially people in the scientific society community. Thanks for coming out today. But lots of others as well, because we really hope to connect these efforts to those that are going on in other areas and with other people. Also curious if you are connected with a science society, either work for one or a member of one, or perhaps even just attend conferences or publish in journals. Maybe let us know in the chat. This will be really helpful to us in kind of getting a sense of who all is involved in different things, and make sure that we can bring as many partners in as possible as well. So go ahead and just jump that drop that in the chat, if you will. And in the meantime, I'll let you kind of know what we have planned for the rest of our time. So Keita, Lexi, and I have prepared some questions to actually ask each other. So I guess sort of a three-way interview going on here, where we're all the interviewers and the interviewees. And we're, as I said, we're really eager to incorporate your questions alongside the ones we've prepared. So please feel free to keep those coming at any time as well. So first, Keita and then Lexi, maybe could you give us a little bit more information about your background and why this topic is of interest to you?
Yeah, I'll go first. So just kind of briefly about who I am. Yes, I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for ASA, the Acoustical Society of America. I got into outreach specifically myself when I was doing my graduate work in linguistics. And I did all of my data gathering at a science museum, where outreach was an explicit component of our IRB, where we were required to do outreach if we were going to collect data. And so I worked a lot with kids and families that were attending the science museum and needed to explain my science to them. And luckily, I did get explicit training on how to do that, but I know a lot of folks don't. The other thing that I learned from that experience was that I wanted to go into science communication, science engagement, and science outreach. And that's when I came to ASA. Now, ASA has specifically been doing kind of K through 12 science engagement. And I wanted to come to this initiative to see what other organizations are doing, how other organizations do it. I think ASA, we do feel that we're doing K through 12 education pretty well, but that doesn't mean we can't improve. But similarly, we also want to reach out into other types of civic engagement beyond K through 12. And we definitely need some help there. And there are so many organizations and societies that are doing a good job that we want to learn from and hopefully collaborate with. And we think that this is the perfect place to do that. Lexi?
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So Lexi Schultz. I'm the VP of Public Affairs at the American Geophysical Union, and Public Affairs is roughly speaking what AGU calls policy, but our work really is about this connecting science to society. Policy being one branch of that society, but we work really collaboratively within AGU on various programs under the kind of overall heading of sharing science, and it's really about connecting to the public, to media, to policymakers, and sort of to all the audiences that kind of integrate with society. I'll talk a little bit more about civic science and our role there. I just wanted to say, you know, my background is a little bit funny because I have an environmental chemistry background. And as I was contemplating getting my PhD, I was talking to some of my mentors where I was a research assistant and asking about how science changes, you know, the world, works for that, you know, that culture change that is part of that collective impact video. And at the time I was told that that's not a scientist's job. And I think those same scientists probably would not say that necessarily now, but that led me ultimately to seek out a career in science policy. I ended up going to law school. I have an environmental law degree, and I kind of worked my way back into really helping drive kind of a science policy approach. And throughout my career, that connection, that integration of science and society has really been sort of one of my driving forces. And I'm very fortunate to be able to be at AGU where that's actually a job. So, and I really appreciate all the fellows, and as I've been reading where all of you work, I really appreciate how many different ways our kind of science community has sought to do that. And we'll talk about this, but ultimately we would love to see this become much more normalized within scientific culture.
Yeah, thank you both so much. Great, so maybe we can start at the beginning, which is before my involvement in this project. And Lexi, I'm particularly interested. Lexi is a member of the steering committee, along with representatives from AAAS, ASCB, and Research America that have really helped to catalyze this and start this effort. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about how it all started.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're kind of fortunate. So I know for AGU, this kind of whole science and society piece has been something that's been growing over the last decade. I think some societies were doing it longer, some societies a little bit less, but we've all been in our own little boats. And it was about, I guess, about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, maybe a couple of years ago, we were actually approached by the Cowley Foundation. And there were a number of foundations that funded different science societies that were seeing all these efforts and really started challenging us to think more deeply about how we could come together, really to work together collaboratively, to learn from each other. We all talked to each other, but, you know, that wasn't driving us forward together. And so they created a fellows program where we were very fortunate to have the first in that, which was the Civic Science Fellow. And we were very, very fortunate to find Rose. And through Rose's leadership, we've really come together. And Rose, how many societies are in that broader community that you've been, you know, working with and doing research? It's several dozen, right?
Yeah, we've got over 40 who are, you know, affiliated in various capacities, which is really cool.
You know, and so we, Rose will talk a little bit more about that work, but what we've been doing, but we've had a number of workshops together, and we've formed subcommittees to work together. But really, it was about Cowley in particular really coming to a subset of us and saying, will you lead this, will you host this? And so that's how the steering committee came about and how Rose came about in this whole effort.
Thank you, that's great. Kita, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about why you decided to get involved in this work, and maybe also why you see the work as important.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So one, I had been attending an event that was hosted by the American Institute of Physics for science communication with graduate students. And they had this kind of little section for staff about science communication. And I got to hear a bunch of AIP member societies talk about what they were doing in science communication, civic engagement in these things. And while ASA is a member of the American Institute of Physics, and we communicate with those folks and collaborate much in the way that we've all been talking about, it is very haphazard. It happens kind of at chance, or if there's a really driving force from one organization or the other. And luckily, Rose was at that event and told us about this initiative. And it became really clear to me that this was something that not only did ASA need this, but a lot of societies and organizations needed this driving force to pull us together and come up with actionable items and goals and frameworks, and so that we can all learn from each other. And so it was really important for me to represent ASA in this initiative, because ASA is moving in the same direction of we need to be engaged with society, not only for the sake of our society, but for the sake of the society in a broader sense. And so that was really why I got involved, because I could see the value instantly, because I could see what all of these other organizations are doing, but there wasn't a really clear path to access that information or to work with those people. And it seemed really clear to me that this initiative would make that possible. And so that was why I wanted to get ASA involved in this kind of early on and jump in kind of both feet.
That's great, thank you. And maybe if you could both share a little bit about sort of zooming out for 1 second, how you see kind of civic science or science engagement more generally, and then our collaborative work as, excuse me, so key sort of to our missions and our success. Lexi, you wanna jump in first?
Absolutely, and you know, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but for us, this effort is really about the hope that science will become more, I don't know, more completely, I guess, integrated with society, and in a way that leads to a more just world overall. Science is really an incredibly important tool in all of our health and community health, personal health, environmental health, you know, just really across the board. But that science really has to be accessible, it has to be usable, and it has to be used. And using it means that scientists really have to engage. It's not just, you know, the public's not going to access science just by looking on a website or looking at data that may or may not be in a form that is valuable to them. You know, and specifically today, as we're, you know, speaking on Juneteenth, and in a world where we've been dealing much more visually, much more viscerally about racism, you know, a lot of the science challenges we face have been borne by communities of color more than anything else. And that's true of the pandemic, it's true of climate change, it's true of environmental degradation. And even as the science community grapples with its own whiteness, and as we tackle racism head on and think about what we can do differently, it's also true that we have to really think about this role of civic science so that we're promoting this model of collaboration between the science community and communities across the board, you know, and especially the communities that have been dealing with the brunt and some of the issues, you know, that we're facing.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. Kita, do you have anything to add about, yeah, the kind of the importance to you?
Yeah, so I think that this is particularly given this time that we're in, and as Lexi mentioned, a lot of societies are grappling with how we as institutions ourselves can help alleviate and change what we're experiencing, and also recognize that we are responsible for some of these realities. And so some societies, some organizations are kind of at different points in that discovery or that process. And having an initiative like this really helps us lean on our colleagues and our friends to see what we can do to change for the better. And really that is what civic engagement is going to help us do, is to bring everybody up so that we can all be part of this discussion at the same table. And I think that the more societies and folks that are involved, the better that will be, because we'll be able to bounce these ideas off of each other. And really the imagery of the boat really makes sense here, is we need to help the people that need help and look to the people who are doing a good job.
Thank you. So maybe, I think this is really helpful, kind of broader context for the civic science and the work we're doing. Maybe we can zoom in quickly to talk about some of the programs that you're both involved with. So Lexi, maybe can you start us off by sharing something at AGU that really connects to our shared civic science work?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I love that Rose said, ooh, teaser, you know, there are these two initiatives that, you know, Kita and I are going to talk about later. So one of the things that I think I'm particularly proud of is our Voices for Science program. And this is something that we started 3 years ago. And it's an effort where scientists commit to engaging in monthly activities to connect with society. Again, kind of public, media, policymakers. And in support, they get support from AGU. We do a workshop for them. We have an online platform for them. We have monthly phone calls, actually now Zoom meetings, so everything is Zoom meetings. And really it's creating that community. And so it's been, it was 30 the first year, 35, this year it's 40 scientists. And our thought was, who the heck is gonna wanna do this, you know, committing to all these monthly activities. But the outpouring of desire, we had 100 applications the first year, 200 the second year, and it's really this very strong desire to do the work, have support for the work, but have a community of support for each other and to be recognized for this work. We write letters to each of their institutions talking about the value of this role and their particular role in it, and they've been wonderful. When it was still an in-person effort, the reach of these just, you know, a few dozen people has been in the thousands to tens of thousands in person. And the online outreach, which is continuing, has been in the millions of people. And really more than that, the support for each other, the cohorts have continued to stay connected with each other. So I'm particularly proud of that because it was an experiment that I think has really kind of worked and shown the need amongst the science community for some recognition and support for this. The other thing I just want to call out, and forgive me, Kita, for going on, is we are in the midst right now of a diversity, equity, and inclusion virtual advocacy month. We had 100 people sign up for this. We held a workshop with talking about the issue and some of the resources, but it's a chance for scientists to connect with policymakers. We're focused at the federal level, although they can apply it locally as well. We highlight several federal bills that are promoting kind of STEM diversity and dealing with sexual harassment and other issues that are relevant, but it's a chance for scientists to talk about the value of their own work, tell their own stories, and then connect that with action. And so I'll be able to report back, hopefully at the end of this month. We're asking for meetings to occur by the end of next week, so we'll see what happens. But so those two initiatives. And Kita, since I've babbled on, you want to talk about, you know, your efforts?
Yeah, one, I want to say that when I learned about these initiatives that were going on with AGU, I was like, this is great. This is exactly the kind of thing that ASA needs to hear about, because hopefully these are the kinds of programs that ASA can help support or kind of latch onto or collaborate with in ways that as a smaller society, we might not have the the power, whether that's financial or human power, to pull it off. And so I love hearing about these kinds of things. So as Rose teased before, one of the big things that ASA is involved in is the International Year of Sound, which originally was 2020, but given the pandemic has been extended through 2021. So we have the pleasure of having the International Years of Sound, which presents wonderful opportunities and interesting challenges. And one of the things that we had planned was to have in-person physical meetings where people could meet acousticians and learn about the field, and they would be kind of public lecture Q&A type sessions and maybe some hands-on experience with equipment. We had to quickly pivot that to virtual so that we could still do them. But one of the things that has been nice with doing it virtual is that now I can work with a much broader population of folks and ask people to take part and share their experience. And so I have taken that opportunity to ask some more early career people. I've looked at asking graduate students, and we're even maybe going to try and find some undergrads to talk. And so this is for the public, and that's the idea, is really to introduce the kind of breadth of acoustics, and just kind of broadly saying, so the International Year is this really big global initiative to highlight kind of the ever-presence and importance of sound in all aspects of our lives, and that understanding sound-related issues is actually really beneficial for society as a whole. One of the things that comes to mind right now, for example, with protests ongoing, are these acoustic weapons that are being used to disperse crowds. And so this is something that our society is also trying to get involved with in terms of policy statements and informing policymakers about this type of equipment. And so this is all kind of wrapped up in the International Year of Sound to try and increase awareness. But another program that we worked on, like I said, we do a lot of work with K through 12. We always invite the public to our meetings. So kind of in a scaled down version of Family Science Days, we have specific sessions where students and families can come and talk to acousticians and have some hands-on experience with some fun science demonstrations and things like that. But it's really quite small scale right now. And I think a lot of societies, that's what they're experiencing, and they want to know how to scale up. And that's what this initiative is really helping us see.
That's great. Thank you so much. I suspect that maybe one of you has a question for me next, but I'd love to kind of.
Yeah. So we've all been taught. Oh, am I still muted?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, good. So yes, so Rose, you know, as we've been talking about all of our initiatives, and I know we mentioned that there are now these 40 groups, you had done some of the research to understand what the societies have been working on. I wonder if you could just give us a sense of what you've been finding across the board.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So I think, you know, we've talked a bit about what we're thinking about in terms of civic science, and Keita and Lexi both share kind of a slice of the sort of breadth that goes on at various organizations. And when we started this work last summer, it began with kind of a landscape analysis to get a sense of really what is that whole breadth consist of? What are different societies doing in this space? Looking for some similarities in their activities and differences across organizations, trying to learn more about the challenges they faced in sustaining and really making impact through their programs, what their researchers wanted more of, where there were opportunities really to work together. And so we did a lot of this work together through interviews and sort of a lot of web scanning. I'm going to very briefly paste in the chat the link to this landscape work in case you're interested in checking it out. It's on the CASE website right now. But this really helped us kind of get a sense of where a collective impact approach could make the biggest difference, and what it was that we really might do in order to align our boats a little bit more, though there is, I should also say, kind of the diversity across organizations is certainly something we want to maintain. Some of the more disciplinary specific or just kind of unique aspects that different societies have are really what provides a lot of the richness to this landscape. So after the landscape report, we kind of use that as a launching point to brainstorm together. Many of us were in person because we're largely located in the DC area, to brainstorm some of the challenges and the opportunities that societies, as organizations have for supporting researchers who engage. So we thought about things like when we want to support effective engagement, of course, it's a big open question about what that means, but then kind of dug into what kind of opportunities do we have as societies uniquely to support that, or to support sort of sustained engagement, to support engagement in with the backdrop of the current and ever evolving kind of political and social dynamics that we find ourselves in. So we really kind of tried to think all around the question of what is our role in this landscape and what can we do together. And then from there, we had a committee who worked with me especially to iterate and develop what we call a common agenda, and that's just our set of goals, our understanding of what it is that we can do together that would really make a difference, paired with kind of a broader vision and our guiding principles, the things that would really direct our work. Once we kind of established that common agenda, we used that as a launching point to kind of develop specific project groups who would focus on the individual goals separately and kind of tackle them in ways that they saw fit. And one of the big overarching goals before we jump into what those project groups look like, that I alluded to at the beginning is kind of a culture change. And that's really what I would say drives all of the work that we do. It's kind of the high level goal under which many of the other goals are contained. So Lexi, I wanted to ask a little bit for you to see if you'd be willing to elaborate a little bit on when we're talking about this culture change in science, what are we talking about so far in your mind?
Yeah, and we kind of have been alluding to this, but I referenced the fact that for the Voices for Science, creating that community and that kind of recognition and awareness was part of what was so valuable to that group. And part of this is that while this work is going on, and it is going on, it is not really become a part of our kind of scientific culture across the board. So really, this is about this engagement work being normalized as part of science. We'd like to see all scientific institutions, so certainly science societies for those of us, but academia, the science funders, some of the kind of science advisory bodies really see engagement as crucial to science. So, and rewarded by tenure, rewarded by promotions, rewarded by honors, rewarded by receiving grants. And until it's that, it's not really going to be integrated. So that's what we really like to see. And right now there is the broader impacts sort of check the box for National Science Foundation. I know NSF takes it seriously, but we really want to flip it on its head and have the engagement with society sort of be integrated into science research because it is part of the culture overall. And to do it collaboratively, we haven't really talked a lot about collaborative science, but there's a big movement that's kind of part of this broader civic science, which is about scientists and communities working together to structure scientific research from the beginning. And so that's kind of what we mean. Ultimately, that's the type of culture change we're looking for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. So I think one of the ways we're thinking about working towards that culture change is sort of first through developing a really strong foundation of societies kind of building their own capacity for supporting engagement. So Kita, I know you've been particularly involved in our group that's really focused on that, fostering that learning culture. And I was wondering if you could share a bit more about what that work looks like.
Yeah, of course. So one of the key factors in all of this, and that's really tying all of us together, is this idea of communities of practice. And we are all in this and we all have a shared goal, which is really important in that we can all learn from each other. I've said it a lot. I'll probably say it again. But we had to really develop this community of practice. And so the initiative in and of itself is a community of practice. It's brought all of these organizations and all of these various folks together to talk about what we are already doing and what commonalities we share, and in what ways we can really start to look at questions of success and look at metrics, and get to these overarching goals of changing culture. And I think that what's good is everyone that's involved is already kind of, we want to get to that point where we're changing that culture. And so we're at this stage where the learning community is a lot about learning exchange, and finding ways to actually learn from each other and what other organizations are doing and incorporate those lessons. And so we have had, originally, I think a little bit before I got involved, there were a lot of physical meetings, as Rose said, in DC. But since the pandemic and quarantine, we've had a lot of Zoom calls, and these are really fruitful calls where people are calling in and saying what their societies are doing, what they have learned from their mistakes or successes, particularly in this turn from moving from physical to virtual in regards to civic engagement, and ways that we can transform what we have done in the past into this new world that we're living in. And I think a really good example is the way that we do engage policymakers, because it's really different right now. And this is something that we can all learn from. So AGU is doing a lot of this. ASA was not doing much of this pre-coronavirus. And now we can see these kind of two examples. And so this is a really useful learning exchange just in that regard of hearing what other folks are doing. But we've had some more ways of maintaining this community, which is we've got a forum board, which is really useful. People can kind of post questions and post resources that they're doing or that they have or that they know of. This has been really helpful with everyone pivoting to virtual meetings, for example, just kind of broadly speaking, but still how this virtual pivot works for civic engagement can be different, particularly when we're trying to reach people who don't know about our societies or these events. And so hearing how other people are doing it is very useful. And then, of course, just the census, this landscape census has been extremely useful. This resource is something that I have already kind of been going through myself as the representative for ASA and looking at projects, ongoing projects that one, ASA can learn, perhaps we can do a version of that ourselves, or tapping the person that is doing that and saying, hey, maybe we can do this together. And so this is a way, this community of practice has really helped me, one, just see what is out there, and lean on everyone else that is doing wonderful work, but also to share our own work. Because I know ASA is a smaller organization. A lot of folks don't know that we exist. And so just that aspect is really helpful as well, because people can look to us for examples, or say, we were looking for somebody who did work like this, and it turns out there is a society that does that, and I just didn't know about them. So this community is really helpful for that reason alone, I think. And so I'm really happy that it exists. But there's also other reasons that it's really important, and I think Lexi can probably can speak to that about other ways that we can show why this is valuable work to be doing.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about a committee that I'm part of, and then Erica asked a question in the box that maybe I can answer at the same time. So one subcommittee has been what we're calling signaling value, and the idea of it is to demonstrate the importance of civic science. So the project that we came up with around this was to develop a short statement that could be used as a sign-on statement for science societies. And it just clearly states what civic science is or how we're describing it, because we know this is a term that has different meanings, but essentially it's about this engagement with society, explicitly stating its value, and then using that statement to demonstrate the interest and commitment of science societies. Thank you for dropping that in, Rose. I was going to ask you to do that. And we now have about 15 science societies on it. Ultimately, we'd like to see 50 or more. So if you're interested and your society hasn't signed on, please, consider that. This is not an end in itself. What we wanted to do was to have the science societies be able to speak with one voice in order to engage other institutions, as we talked about, to start to drive this kind of culture change, or as one avenue to do that. So what we'd like to do is to open up a dialogue with the academic community, maybe to promote a similar type of statement from within academia. But really, to start, what we wanted to do was to start that dialogue with some leaders in the academic world. So we know that there are universities, departments, individual faculty that are doing a good job of this. It's not widespread enough, it's not universal enough, but we'd like to use those leaders to help guide us, and maybe to figure out how to collaborate with us, to drive the bigger change. And I certainly would invite anyone that's involved here, either to help us be a part of that, or if you're in the academic world, to help us think through who we might reach out to and how to get that going. So I really appreciate that. And Erica's question about our science society seeing more engagement, I think yes. I think there's a couple of things that are driving that. One, I think frankly, there are some scientists who have more time because they haven't been able to get into the lab or the field. I think, everybody's sitting at home more, there's been less travel, and so there's some of that, but there's a couple of ways that we can demonstrate it. One, I'm really encouraged by the fact that we had 100 scientists sign up for our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion virtual advocacy days. We don't usually get 100 people signing up for our advocacy days, so that's one little, example. The other thing is just the meetings and the way scientists are engaging in the meetings. Because everything is virtual, it actually has allowed more people to be involved. And so ordinarily groups that see several hundred, people sign up for meetings have seen several thousand. AGU's meeting which is normally 28,000 in person. We're going all virtual in December. We'll see what that's like, but we have more of this kind of engagement content than we've ever had before. So we will see, but I think very anecdotally at the moment, it's yes.
Edith, are you seeing similar?
Yes, we've had a similar experience with our pivot to virtual. As we've had more engagement, particularly with some of our engagement committees, right, where we've got a policy, a panel on public policy, and that one was more highly attended than in physical meetings. Our education and acoustics committee meetings have been far more highly attended. I think that, as has been mentioned, that there's lots of reasons for this, and I'm hoping that one of the things that we can do is we can learn from this experience in the future, and it may be the case that physical meetings are ultimately what we want to do, but how can we maintain the engagement of the people that don't want to come to a physical meeting or can't come to a physical meeting, and taking those lessons learned and applying them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also wanted to reiterate, please feel free to drop additional questions in the chat, particularly if you're interested in thinking about intersections between what we've been talking about and what you do. But in the meantime, I'll ask maybe both Kita and Lexi to weigh in briefly on just sort of what you personally have taken away from this initiative and what have been the benefits for you.
Kita, maybe you could start, but then I'm also going to ask the same question of Rose.
Yeah, I'll start. So one of the things that the main benefits for me is that I am the only staff member whose focus is education and outreach, which are kind of really big topics in and of themselves. And so it's really nice to basically have this network of colleagues that are doing the same or similar work that I am doing. And so for me personally, it's not such a big job when I know that I can talk to other folks that are doing it, that maybe a specific society organization doesn't have the funds to have, you know, dedicated team to do this. And so I think that's one of the best takeaways from this initiative is just having this supportive network of folks who are doing work like this, so that it's not always, one, we've said before that we don't want people to start from scratch every time when there might be resources out there. And so that's the same on kind of a staff employee level, where if these resources are out there, then I would love to have them, as opposed to kind of dig for them or spend mental energy trying to find them myself, because they are out there. But if it's work just to get them, that makes doing the actual work difficult. If you want to have that end goal, getting there needs to be as easy as possible. And so I think that's really a good takeaway for me, is just the support that everyone has been giving me. And then Lexi.
Yeah. I will just say, it's been wonderful to think about this concept of collective impact. I really benefited from seeing both what everybody else is doing and also who's sort of driving some of the change and where some of the leadership is. I really appreciate Cowley's driving us in this direction. And honestly, I've been very fortunate to work with Rose and have really appreciated Rose's kind of guidance and leadership in helping to just make sure that we're continuing to grow as we move towards that collective impact. And Rose, because you came into this, you know, when we hired Rose for this position, it was kind of this nebulous thing that she helped to shape and form. And I'm wondering what you've seen as the benefit, not just for you, but also, you know, like, how has this matched your expectations?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I'll share the reason I applied for this position is that I am a social scientist. I had done a lot of research on communications, especially sort of at the pretty specific level of how do you craft messages that are effective in promoting understanding and support for systemic policy change. And it was really fascinating, and I think it's really important work, but it was also very clear to me that our challenges are much larger than a well-crafted message. And so when I read the posting for the civic science fellow position that I have, I remember very clearly the thought that came into my head is, this sounds really important and I have no idea how someone would do this. So I'm gonna try. It certainly sounded to me like an invitation to think about the system in which science engagement happens, and that is exactly what it has been. I think for me personally, I've gotten to kind of practice those systemic thinking skills, as well as kind of the strategy planning and execution, and have had just the most incredible partners from all of these societies to work with alongside. And so the kind of community and network aspect, and recognizing how much we truly can accomplish together that wouldn't be done individually, is what I think continues to motivate me in this work today. And so maybe kind of on that point, we can talk a little bit about our thoughts for the future. So we're 1 year into this work. We did all that in the past month. And we hope that this will not only continue, but expand beyond 2020. And so I'm wondering if, maybe Lexi, I'll call on you first, if you don't mind, if you can share some thoughts about your hopes for the future.
Absolutely. And I will say, I do hope the two elements that we've talked about here today, kind of this culture of learning and kind of the community of practice and the signaling value work to help continue to drive the culture change. I think those are the two pieces that I think show so much promise, and that I really hope continue. It's not an 18-month effort. Your fellowship was 18 months, but this is an ongoing long-term thing. And again, with everything that we're seeing over the last 6 months, I mean, my God, what a different world. But it's only driven home the need for this to me more. So I really want to see this going. And I'm hoping we can capture the chat, because I really appreciate the work that a number of you are doing in this area and would really love to continue to connect with you. I don't know if this is, you know, I hope we only have a few minutes left, but I was really interested in hearing from all of you about, you know, how we might continue to collaborate together. The groups that have been part of this network are just a subset, and we know that, and we want it to continue to grow.
So we've seen some of that in the chat, but I do think it's a great idea to potentially open up. Feel free to raise your hand, or actually with only 30 of us, I welcome if you want to unmute yourself. We're really interested in hearing kind of how you see this work intersecting with yours. And before I forget, I also want to be really clear that we are extremely enthusiastic about potential partners going forward. So if you work at a society, if you volunteer for one, we certainly want to hear from you. I'll drop my email in the chat box, but even others who are outside of societies, because we recognize that this, as I said, it's a whole system challenge, and the solutions will be full system solutions. So please do feel free to either speak up or drop us a note.
So I wanted to mention, because I think this aligns really well with that, is one of the things that I hope to see with this effort going forward. And in some ways, there was a question about what are the biggest challenges for this. And I think one of them right now is financial support and financial resources. And so I think one of the things that I would like to see moving forward is more, not just theoretical buy-in, but we need to have actual financial buy-in from organizations and societies to really make things like this continue and be long-standing positions. So a position like Rose's isn't an 18-month project. We're not going to do this in 18 months. So we need to ensure that this kind of leadership stays with us. And that is going to be with financial support. And I think that that's another of these cultural changes, that is that we expect so many people to do this for free, for the fun of it. And I think that we are at the time where we know that this isn't just something to do as a hobby. I applaud anyone who is kind of doing it as a hobby, but it is something that requires dedicated attention. And so I think it's both a challenge, but also I think something that we can strive for.
Yeah, and that is such an awesome question too. You know, the challenge is to grow and engage the community and how others can help. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Lexi.
And I would definitely say, you know, one of the challenges is frankly knowing what's happening and figuring out how we connect all of these dots. So we're starting, you know, these groups are fantastic, and, you know, the connections we've had so far, but please do reach out to Rose and help us connect to you. If you know of other initiatives or efforts in your other networks, you know, think about ways in which we could connect to them. You know, I really feel like we need to come together if we, you know, what's the word, be the change you want to see in the world. You know, we do need the financial support. Thank you for raising that, Kita. We do need some staff support like what we've had from Rose, but we also need all of us to pull together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, the last thing that comes to mind for me in that area is for those who are in academic settings, we use the phrase signaling the value a lot, but I think you are also incredible messengers for signaling how this work is valuable. If you have the opportunity, if you have mentees, maybe you can encourage them to engage with their society's engagement efforts or other engagement efforts, and really just kind of be a voice for change in your sphere of influence, whatever that is. And that goes, I think, beyond academia as well. We're all on this call because we have some interest in science engagement. And so kind of thinking about, as Kita said, like thinking through what you can do to help others level up from sort of hobby to actually incorporated into their work and into the scientific enterprise. is what we see as kind of the path forward. Kita or Lexi, any parting thoughts from you?
I just want to say, you know, thank you for the chance to kind of talk with all of you. I'm really inspired by all of your work as well. You know, I think each of the community centers and the different fellows and the different programs you're working on are a big piece of this. So I just really appreciate that.
And I'd like to mirror that sentiment as well. And also the sentiment that Rose said, that this is a great way to get involved. So if you know of someone in a society or in a staff, or that they do work in this area, to let us know and get involved. We have currently been doing regular Zoom calls and checking in. And the discussion is really, really quite good. And the development of future workshops and webinars, that can be something that you help us come up with or design, and a reusable resource for the future.
Absolutely. So I just want to say thank you so much to Kita and Lexi for sharing with me, because this this initiative is all about the staff who are kind of driving it forward. And of course, thanks to SciEngage for offering us this invitation. Jeff, did you have any parting thoughts, or should we close up?
That was great. Thank you all. I'm just going to let everybody know, in case you don't, in the chat box is just a link to the webpage where we will have a description of this event, a link to the recording of the video, as well as our past videos. And if anybody has suggestions or thoughts about future discussions that they would like to have, ways to continue this discussion, that's sort of the platform, the central platform that we have. It doesn't have to be through that, but that's what we have for SciEngage. We've had some great suggestions for folks for some future discussions as well, and they all sort of interweave and intersect in different ways. So it's all a learning experience for us. But yeah, our next event will be on July 17th, if everybody wants to mark their calendars. And we'll send out announcements about that, and you can join our mailing list on the website. But that is all from me. Thank you all for listening, participating, leading, everyone, and hope everybody has a good weekend. All right, bye everybody.